Well, Representative Johnson, it's a real pleasure to have you here, and I'm so sorry that it is on a day like today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and just listening to you, Lurie, talk about how you felt this morning with your kids. That is exactly what parents were saying to us the morning we went to the well as they gathered before session to protest and to try to have their voices heard about the Covenant shooting. And, people with tears in their eyes. I just dropped my kids off at school. I hope they're okay when I go to meet the bus or when I go to pick them up with tears in their eyes. This is how people were feeling. And we were not allowed to address the fact that they were there, that they were hurting, and that we cared about their issue. Our mics were either cut or we were not called on. And we couldn't let that day pass with letting those folks that know at least some of us were with them.
That moment, it's so prominent in so many of our minds. The three of you, Representative Pearson, the Justins, as they're called, the three of you standing there as what felt like the lone voices, crying out from the wilderness, to go back to my Bible school days, when you were really standing up for your community, had just experienced something so tragic, and yet while this should not be a partisan issue, it was very clear from the outside perspective, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt very clear that there was indeed a partisan approach to gun violence control. And the fact that the three of you were so disrespected, even though it was, again, clear to those of us watching that you were there because your constituents sent you there, you were doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And yet the Republicans in your state legislature really took what felt like a very partisan approach and shut down or attempted to shut down so much of that advocacy. What is it like to be an elected official in a body today where you are seeing the impacts? You're an educator. You know what these fears are. What is it like to engage with colleagues who are so committed to this weapon, these handheld weapons of mass destruction, that they put AR-15 pins on their lapel right next to the American
I,
flag? Talk to us about what that experience is like for you in
it
those
is so
contexts.
hard. We work in a toxic environment. I'm a professional. I'm never rude to people, and my colleagues in any of that. But it's just remarkable that you're sitting. I'm in criminal justice committee, and I'm sitting in committee, and I'm like, these these men care nothing about
Hmm.
these children. They are protecting guns instead of protecting children. And
Hmm.
it is remarkable to me that that is where we are, and that they want to control the message so intensely that they take away the voices of the 70,000 people that I represent. I mean, between the three of us, we represent 210,000 Tennesseans.
Wow.
And the voices of our districts are just as important as the voices of the speaker's district.
Right.
By the way, he doesn't live in his district, but
I was going to get to that, but
but
yes.
those voices are equally as important. And to
Mm.
totally shut those voices down, it even gets more interesting than that. What you see them do, they have a different way of dealing with the three of us. With me, it's typically they won't call on me. But with
Mm.
Rep Pearson and Rep Jones, is like it's some sort of power trip to call on them and then shut their mics.
Mm.
It's
So
it's
we,
it's pretty
oh,
obvious.
yeah, yeah. I
They
will,
think
for
they're
those of you
slick,
who
but it's real clear.
and we're seeing it. We're seeing it. For those of you who don't know the demographics of the Justins and Representative Pearson, Representative Jones, and Representative Johnson, you are a white female, or that is how you present, and Representative Jones, Representative Pearson are black males. And so the idea that you as a female legislator and they as black male legislators, we're being selectively called upon. The two of them faced expulsion. They had to have a subsequent election. You not being acknowledged at all. Is there something unique about the 210,000 Tennesseans that you represent that is not reflected throughout the state? Talk to us
Well,
about how, at the state level, what is the call? What is the demand from Tennesseans? Because it strikes me as very odd that those would be the only Tennesseans that are concerned about these and other issues.
well, they did put me up for expulsion. but I got by one vote.
Wow. Mm.
Interestingly enough, the white lady got more votes than my two young colleagues.
Isn't that funny how that happens, Representative?
Isn't that interesting? And
Mm.
we just have to call it what it is. Recently on my 95 county tour, I was talking to a couple, and they said we've been Republicans our whole life, but we're voting Democratic this year. And they said it's because they watched all the hearings all the way through, start to finish.
Mm.
And they said at the end of it, she said her husband said, "I'm never voting for a Tennessee Republican again." They
My
saw
God.
the racism. They saw it. I mean,
Mm.
they're not nice to me. There was misogyny all over my hearing,
Oh
but
yeah.
racism was blatant in
Mm.
Rep Pearson and Rep Jones hearings, without a doubt.
You are now running for Senate to represent your entire great state, and you have some interesting competition. Your incumbent, or the incumbent in that position, has definitely, when it comes to gun issues, has definitely made it clear which side of the line she stands on. And let's talk about some of the things you learned on that 95 county tour. What are some of the issues that those your would-be constituents, let's say will-be constituents, what were some of the things that they shared with you that are driving their concerns about your state, and what is it that your candidacy to represent them in the Senate, how would that differ from what they're currently receiving from the occupant of that seat?
Well, I think we have one county left on our tour. So yesterday the conversation centered around gun violence.
Mm.
I was in a county that ended up that two counties that had no internet. So I mean, I didn't have any phone service. I didn't even know about the shooting until I got to the first county, and they told me, but we didn't have a lot of details. But
Mhm.
everyone wanted to talk about gun violence. And, when people come to my campaign and tell me that I'm a Republican or I'm an independent, but I'm voting for you, I had 50 Republicans at my campaign kickoff 1 year ago today. And that's not the usual. But
That's
those people were there for either gun violence or abortion care. That's
right.
why they were there. Those are two
Yeah.
big ones. But since I've been going to all 95 counties, I'm hearing from people like, they watch the hearings and they can't believe what that party is doing, what their lifetime party is doing. I had one couple in a rural county come and say, "We've been Republicans our whole lives. We've never donated to a candidate, but we're going to donate to you." And I asked them, what brought them over to our campaign, and they said, "We're evangelical Christians, and we don't feel like our party is practicing the faith anymore."
Mm.
And I thought
This is
that was
something.
pretty
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, this is something that we're beginning to see a lot of in terms of people who are grappling with this idea that their political party doesn't have to be their identity and that they can make choices outside of that. I want to circle back to something you said just a moment ago, that you were in a county that didn't have any internet, and we've been speaking with a number of candidates right now, and particularly candidates who would be representing rural America. And one of the things I'm in the Northeast. If I don't have internet for 5 minutes, I'm panicking. Like, what is going on? But you are one of many candidates that we've been speaking with that have been talking about the real challenges that rural communities in particular face when it comes to not having access to broadband and the same level of utilities and infrastructure. What would it mean? How would you position yourself to ensure that those counties that are currently not able to access these services, which we've come to understand are life and death for so many, what is your position on broadband expansion and how you would provide some of those services to the counties that you would be representing?
Well, first of all, I would have voted for the Infrastructure Act that is updating and bringing broadband to Tennessee. And of course, Marsha Blackburn voted against it.
Huh. So wait a minute. I just want to pause there because we have a lot of Tennessee listeners. You mean to tell me that the people in your state who do not have broadband, had Marsha Blackburn's vote carried the day, there wouldn't be no plans for them to get broadband. They'd still be not in anticipation of these new fibers and lines coming in to connect them to the rest of the world. Is that correct?
Exactly. And I was probably out of service for 4 or 5 hours where
Wow.
I was. And so it was remarkable. Like you, 5 minutes and I'm losing it. And
Right.
so it was so hard, and I was wanting to find out about the shooting. I don't know if you know my history, but I taught school for 27 years, and
Right.
we had a school shooting in a school where I was teaching at Central High School in 2008.
Mm,
And, I just know what it feels like. I saw it. I saw the terror on the kids' faces.
yeah,
Um, you you shouldn't have to see it or feel it to know how traumatizing it is.
that's right.
And
That's
it
right.
just is remarkable to me. And Marsha Blackburn is one of the top receivers of NRA dollars. She's never voted for a piece of gun sense legislation.
Mm.
She just huge defender and of the NRA because that's where she gets much of her money from.
And so, from your understanding, and as someone who is currently in office, if you are getting a significant portion of your, and this is going to be a very basic question, but if
Yeah.
you're, yeah, I'm being a little facetious, if most of your funds are coming from organizations that support the expansion of gun rights, we can pretty much count on you to not be in a position where you're going to do any much more than offer your thoughts and prayers. Representative Johnson, as a former educator, did thoughts and prayers bring back any of the students? Did the thoughts and the prayers prevent the, obviously it didn't prevent the gun violence in your school. I don't know if you have any instances where thoughts and prayers have been sufficient to prevent incidences of gun violence. Please let us know if you have. But when that's the political response to violence in our community that impacts all of us, what does that tell you about the difference between the parties and the positions that they hold on this issue?
Well, what it tells me, and the reason I decided to run for US It is Tennesseans deserve better. They deserve someone who represents them, not the lobbyists and the corporations and the wealthy and well connected. Marsha Blackburn's been in DC for 21 years and hasn't done a thing for
Wow.
Tennessee families. Nothing. And so, she's got an R beside her name, and that's about it. She's not doing things. That's why it's so important to get to all 95 counties and talk to them about the things that really are going to help their family, because that's the policies Democrats want to bring. We want to raise the wage. We have a 7.25 minimum wage in Tennessee. An 18-year-old can't live on that. I mean, no one can live on that. We did not expand Medicaid. So we've got so many people and families with no access to affordable health care.
Mm.
Marsha Blackburn also is a big receiver of big pharma dollars. She voted against capping insulin at $35. We have one of the
What?
highest incidences of diabetes in the country, and she voted against capping insulin at $35. She voted against being able to negotiate drug prices for seniors. She voted against the Violence Against Women Act.
Wow.
She
And
voted against equal pay for
oh,
equal work. She voted against the child tax credit.
mm,
She
when you
does
put it like that,
nothing.
when you lay out all the things that she's against and we compare it to what she's for, which is the free expansion of guns, it feels to me like people are starting to finally wake up to this notion that having the same letter behind your name isn't going to be sufficient. When I'm not on these airwaves, I actually run a racial justice law center in Brooklyn. And one of the things we really focus on is voter education and preparing people who have been traditionally marginalized and haven't really been, they're not, they don't have years of prime and super prime voting behind them. And one of the things I'm realizing is that so many people just don't have a lot of basic information about civics, about how our society and government works. When you're talking to people who are realizing, wait a minute, you have an R behind your name, I have an R behind my name, but you don't really speak for me. Can you talk to us a little bit about the role that civic education and having a prepared electorate, which is, I think, one of the results of doing a 95 county tour, you're preparing the electorate to really think more critically about this. Give us a sense as to what role civic education plays, particularly as someone with decades in the classroom.
Yeah, it's a critical role, and that's another thing that we talked about yesterday. Like, how our county is so red. How can we change our county? And I said, well, you've got to organize. We really need to focus on rural organizing, because the Republican policy in the state and the gerrymandering that has created almost, we have 74 Republicans and 25 Democrats, and that's it. So
Wow.
most of our counties don't have Democratic representation, so they're not getting Democratic message.
Mm.
And if you're not hearing our message, and it's not, because sometimes people get angry and say, these people are voting against their own interest. It's not that. It's that they're working 2 and 3 jobs, trying to keep the lights on and trying to keep food on the table. And they don't have the time to follow politics like I do. And all they can hear on the way to work and home is conservative talk radio. There's no other kind in Tennessee. And then they get home and they watch some Fox News. They're being lied to constantly. The only information they're getting, I tell people all the time, do you understand? They're not seeing anything that we are seeing.
Wow.
And so when you think about the fact that they don't see any of the news that I see, because
Right.
people don't really watch much local news anymore. So they're
That's right.
getting all their information from conservative talk radio and Fox News. And
Mm.
so we have
And
got to get, according to them, Marsha Blackburn wants to think that the reason their family is struggling is because 2 women down the street are married. That has absolutely nothing to do with their lives.
right.
But to hear Republicans tell it, that's the whole problem. Or
Mm.
immigrants, something like that. But the reality
Right.
is they're struggling because Republicans won't raise the minimum wage from 725, because Republicans won't expand Medicaid, because Republicans won't fully invest in our public schools and want to defund public ed with privatization scams. This is
Mm.
why their families are struggling. And that is the message we have got to get to them.
That's right. I see from some of our listeners, shout out to Alan Orr, phenomenal immigration attorney. He is in Tennessee, as I understand it, and he's concerned that there's no debate. Apparently, there's some news that Marsha Blackburn is not going to debate with you. And she, according to his understanding, she hasn't even had a town hall in the past 7 years. Is there any news on that front? Will there be a debate between you and the incumbent? I think there's a clear contrast, and I'd love to see some of that contrast borne out on the stage.
I mean, that's what you have to do when you're running for office. You've got to show the contrast, and there couldn't be a broader contrast
Mm,
between myself and Marsha Blackburn. And
mm,
so far, I have heard her. I have responded yes to every request from the Tennessean, from WATE, WBIR. Every request I've received from the media for debate, I have said yes, I will. And
mm.
I have heard nothing back so far. The Tennessean did print that she did not respond. But as far as the TV stations, I don't know yet if she has responded. I think today might be the deadline for one of them, because they even gave us a date of the night before the primary. I mean, the night before early voting. So I
Okay.
said, absolutely yes. And I have asked on social media, we probably are going to send out a press release and do some things to really push this, because that's the whole thing. Tennesseans deserve to
Right.
hear from the people that they want to elect them, and they need to know what their goals are. And they need to know that Marsha Blackburn supports a federal abortion ban. You know,
It does.
yeah, yes, she does. And she
Oh,
also voted against contraception, access to contraception and IVF.
mm.
She questioned the decision that allowed us to have access to contraception. So we
I
know,
remember that. Yeah.
yeah, we
Yeah.
know that she is coming for that. It's very clear. She can deny it if she likes. Her statement's on video. And what, Connecticut versus Griswold, I think, is that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we know what she's coming after. The people deserve to know. They deserve to hear us both at the same time talking about those issues and where we are. Because
That's
Tennesseans are different today than they were when she was elected in 2018. And she was starting to see that when she was in Congress, and that last town hall 7.5 years ago, when she got some tough questions and it kind of became a mess, and she made some claims about these people. They weren't from her district. And yes, they absolutely were. She thought
mm.
because if they were in her district, they believed exactly what she believed and wouldn't dare challenge her. But they did. And it became a CNN story on that last town hall.
Yes. Yes, it did. For people who are listening right now, both within Tennessee and those around the nation and internationally, what's the best way for them to support your campaign? Are you in need of volunteers? What resources are you looking for? How can folks help not only you, but make sure that the Democrats are able to not just keep the Senate, but God help us all expand it so we can get some meaningful legislation passed?
Yeah, absolutely. We've also got some of the worst in Congress. We've got Andy Ogles, who I call Tennessee Santos, and we've got Mark Green, and so we've got some great folks running for Congress. A lot of great women running for Congress in a lot of the seats, but
Excellent.
much better candidates for Congress. We need to flip some down ballot state house and state senate seats. And we're going to do it because, like you said, people are paying more attention, especially in Tennessee, than they ever did before, because a lot of Republicans were watching those hearings and watching what was happening and thinking about the safety of their kids. But instead, we're trying to throw out members who tried to talk about it. You
Mm.
know? And we had the Tennessee Firearms Association sitting upstairs intentionally next to Covenant families wearing those AR-15 pins. That's what the antagonistic um, manner that they act when they are in the Capitol, as if they own the place, because the Republicans act like they are drunk on power.
Mm.
So we need to change this. People are fired up. We need people to knock doors, to make phone calls, to write postcards. I'm a grassroots. I've always been a grassroots campaigner. I trained under President Obama. That's when the first time I ever got involved in partisan politics and trained up with all of his great organizers. And
Mm.
so for us, it's knocking doors, making those phone calls, writing postcards, and just really getting out and sharing the message. And so people can go to votegloriajohnson.com to donate or to sign up to volunteer. And we've got folks out of state that are so great. They're like, my state's fine. We don't have to worry. So I'll happily make phone calls into your state. So
Yeah.
just a lot of support there. And what we know is Marsha Blackburn only won by 200,000 votes last time in
Oh.
2018. And there are 300,000 Democratic voters who haven't voted the last few cycles because they don't think their vote matters. We're
Yeah.
going to get those 300,000 voters out, and
Mm.
we're going to win this U.S. Senate seat. And when we do that, we're going to flip some down ballot seats as well, and
Mm.
start getting out of this super minority that we are in Tennessee.
That from your lips to God's ears, may it be Ashe and Amen. Let's call them Tennessee 300,000, Tennessee 300K. We're gonna have a nice little hashtag. We're gonna send all the thoughts and real prayers for all the success to you, your campaign, and those down ballot seats as well. I really appreciate how I'm hearing more and more candidates talk not just about their races, but the infrastructure and the ecosystem in which they will have to govern, and that means making sure that you are going into the next session with as much wrong phrase to America. No, not today.
I
With
know.
as much strength and community organizing power behind you as you possibly can. Representative Johnson, it's been a real pleasure having you here. When you win, I want you to come on back and talk to us
Okay.
about how you're going to be flipping some tables in the Senate as well. Thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely.